All right, let's hit go live and kick it off. All right, and we are live. So this is episode 4 on this Formula One Fantasy Analyst podcast series. As always, joining me today, all the way from the UK, we have Kieran from Formula One Fantasy Tracker, and Andre, all the way over from Canberra in Australia, joining in at very late night as we try to put this one together. And the main topics today that we're going to cover is going to be around long-term strategies. So good morning, buongiorno, buenos dias, bon dia, all that good stuff. And let's kick it off. We're talking about long-term strategies today, guys. We talked about it before. One of the big topics that's coming up now that we're going into Portugal are streaks. So, with streaks, what I know off the top of my head is that McLaren is the first constructor to be up for race streak points. Kieran, what any thoughts? Are any of your teams already switching McLaren? What are you thinking?
So I started off by switching Red Bull to Ferrari because Ferrari were going up. But as of right now, McLaren are at 98% sentiment, so they're just about to go up. And McLaren have both constructor streaks available, whereas Ferrari has just one of the streaks available. It's the 10-point one, if I believe. So my thoughts on it: a lot of people are switching to McLaren because they've got both streaks. But let me share my screen because I don't think that's a good idea. Let me pull this up.
And funny enough for everyone, as Kieran is doing this, we all heard everyone's comments. We are now coming with images to you guys, so we can all use it as a reference.
And that's what we have here on the screen. You can see me looking off to the left, but I trust that you're seeing the screen that I'm seeing. So if the scenario that happens in Imola happens again, then fine. McLaren with their plus 15 points is a great pick. But you have to consider that the only reason why McLaren and Ferrari scored so high was, one, because Bottas practically didn't exist that race, and two, Perez made some mistakes. Now, Perez was on pace. Perez had the ability. Yes, he did the overtake in the safety car, and yes, he spun off. Granted, it was a wet track. Perez hasn't really had a chance to drive the Red Bull at a wet track. I would expect him, if the track was dry, to perform extremely well like he did in qualifying. So when you look at these numbers, if you pretend, let's just imagine the scenario that Perez performs as we expect him to, and Bottas actually exists for this race, McLaren don't score that high, and Ferrari don't score that high. Therefore, that 15-point streak bonus doesn't really put a delta over the Red Bull pick, for example. And if Perez does well, the Red Bull pick does even better. At the moment, Red Bull here scored 44 points at Imola. That was that's not even a word. It was mostly carried by Max Verstappen going in P1. And you can expect him to do that again for the next race. Perez came, right, I think, P11. So he started, P3, P2, and dropped it all the way down to P11. And still, that Red Bull constructor pretty much matched Ferrari and McLaren. So on paper, yeah, sure, McLaren have got streaks. It looks good, easy 15 points. But the context around what we expect them to score isn't worth it, in my opinion, because then you just have to make another sub for the next race. So I have Ferrari, and I used that to make some money. But I'm going to switch that out to Red Bull for the race, I believe.
Kieran, would you say it's worth, as we're talking long-term strategies and everything, if someone's been playing the money-making game and maybe they're in the 4 out of 6 on their sub-bank and, you could switch to Red Bull, but to make the budget, you have to take a 10-point penalty then. Are you that convinced into Red Bull where taking that on would make sense to take a 10-point penalty and stick with Red Bull, or do you take the cheaper McLaren and take the streak?
Okay, in that scenario, take the streak because it's just not worth taking a -10, really, in any scenario. For context, I actually made a mistake. I was too focused on making the money as opposed to making sure I had the race team that I wanted. So I'm going to be running Leclerc instead of Perez for this race with my Red Bull constructor, which goes against what I believe in, that Red Bull will do well this race, because ideally I'd want to have Perez as well. But there are certain scenarios where you're just going to have to accept you might not have your ideal selections, but the selections you do have in place aren't exactly bad. It's just I would prefer to have Perez over Leclerc for this race. So don't take the -10. Never take the -10. The McLaren pick with streaks won't be bad. I just believe Red Bull could do better than McLaren with the streaks. And just wait for the next race to repair that, I guess. Again, long season. What are we? We're coming up to race 2 out of 23.
This is race 3 still out of 20 something. It's nuts. We already had a 3-week break and a 2-week break. So after last year, I'm ready for like triple headers to kind of fill my need and, you know, fill the void in my life during off weeks. Andre, what do you think? Like, I mean, what I see a lot of people here, some people commenting are saying they're going to stick with Perez as turbo drivers. That has not been a strategy that pays off well. I mean, what do you think about Kieran's strategy? What are you thinking?
I think none of these decisions are made in a vacuum. And so right now you can have a Ferrari-based team, a McLaren-based team, and a Red Bull-based team. Some of the predictions that I'm running for the models, I'm projecting Red Bull to score about 12 to 13 points more than both Ferrari and McLaren. Ferrari and McLaren being pretty even in that regard. I am myself 4 out of 6 on the subs bank, so I have one free sub left, and right now I have Leclerc, Norris, Tsunoda, Russell, Verstappen, Ferrari, and so I only really have one decision to make. I either upgrade Ferrari to Red Bull, or I take Russell out for Perez. I can make that move, and I believe that I'm going to go for the latter one because it allows me a bit of a differential against some of the other teams. Since I'm running, since I ran the wild card in the very beginning, I now have, you know, a little bit more money, and I can, you know, use that to my advantage, like for probably this race, and I can afford this team that most of the other people would not be able to. So I think I'll probably go that route. I'll stick with Ferrari. They're up for 10-point streak instead of 15-point streak that McLaren will have, and I think that's good enough. And yeah, and in a way it hedges the bets as well, right? You have the Verstappen, you have Leclerc, and then you have Perez. And so if Verstappen and Perez do well, then, you know, Red Bull will do well. I guess I'll miss out on some points, but at least I have both of them in the team. I'll get like 2/3 of the points, or however you want to think about it, maybe 2 out of 3.5, because the constructors score a bit more than just the one. But yeah, I think Ferrari makes sense for me because I don't want to make too many subs. Like, I think Ferrari to McLaren is a lateral move at this stage. I'm definitely going to wait until free practice 1, 2, 3. If they are, you know, punching like way above where Ferrari's at, and they're like, you know, consistently 5th, 6th, maybe, but I will probably go with Russell out, Perez in.
Yeah, that's a good point. So interesting, because actually it was one of the questions that Ben Reeves was asking. He wants to know about taking Ferrari and Perez instead of going to Red Bull. So seems like Ben gets your blessing on the strategies there of how to move forward, but it's more than just a performance-based move. You're also looking at it from, you know, how can you maximize your budget as early as possible?
I mean, I've already kind of maximized it by playing the wild card after round 1. I think at this point there's not that many price movements, and, you know, it's kind of sad to look at. There's just Leclerc, Verstappen, and Norris that are consistently inching upwards, but everybody else is falling, and you're not going to have those assets anyway. So I'm not really sure what to do. I think I'll be able to pick up, if the third race is the same as the first and the second, like not the same, but like, you know, the same kind of hierarchy of teams falls down, then we'll see the same 3-4 assets going up in price.
So it's interesting you say that, and there's an interesting question on the chat. But to come back to something, and I don't think any of us did this homework. But do you still have the historicals of where prices were at specific races last year? Like, do you still have all of that data where we could try to manage or try to understand how many millions have shifted, how many millions ticked over and how many millions have ticked down per race, to kind of try to see a trend and answer the question statistically, do price shifts mellow out towards, the middle of the season, towards the end of the season, or does it continue to stay very wild, as you get closer to race weekends? Because I've still seen a lot of prices shift. I feel like in my gut that towards the end of last year, you still had some decent price shifts going on, and people were still moving around quite a bit. Granted, it might have been too late at that point if you're trying to build budget at that moment, but I'd be curious to see if they'd be still, if statistically speaking, there's still enough price movements to say, hey, you can keep building budget until you go, into the 115 to 120 million range. We did what teams, Kieran, these, what was the highest team last year? What, 115, 116? Was it one of your guys that had the most valuable teams?
Yeah, I believe it's redacted from our Discord. I think he had the most expensive teams. I think all three of his teams occupied 3 of the 5 most expensive slots. I think we do have the data for the price movements, and that would be really interesting to link up and see how much movement there is, and if there's more movement this year. Just going off a whim, I do feel like there are more movements this year, considering all the downtime that we've had, and a lot of movement during the downtime. Are we going to hit $15 million teams? Probably not, just because you can't make as much money as you can before. But I don't think it's a dead process yet. I still think it's quite active, considering that we have a lot of races coming up. I think there's going to be a lot of movement, and a lot of people will have to start making the decisions whether they're going to set up for the races or they're going to try and maximize the budget, because you will have to make these decisions at some points. But going forward, talking about the future races, in terms of the sprint races and their effects on F1 Fantasy, thank you, Fares. We don't know. I believe PlayOn got back to one of us saying that was it you, Eric, that they said they'll get back to everyone and announce it about how they're going to do their F1 Fantasy based on the races with the sprint races on.
So they said that they're going to make the announcement when the announcement to everyone. So everyone gets the announcement at the same time. That was their official response that when I reached out to them. But putting my software developer hat on and knowing and looking at what they've done in the past. So the clear example that comes to me last year with the COVID pandemic was having to adjust for substitute drivers. And at that time, what they did was take the easiest way out from a software developer mindset, and literally they just changed the photo of the driver and changed the name of the driver, and the driver kept all of the statistics. So for one race weekend, Russell became Hamilton from a points sum. Hülkenberg had become Stroll, Hülkenberg had become Perez and all of the statistics were the same. Literally all they changed was the person's name and their photo. If I have to apply that same mentality to what they're going to do with regards to sprint qualifying, is that they would probably take the results from the sprint race as your qualifying position and apply your qualifying position points and whether you beat your teammate or not based on the results of where you finished the race. That's my gut feel, if they are pressed for time, which again, last time they were pressed for time. This year, I think they'll be okay, because the rumor is that the first sprint qualifying races are going to be either Silverstone or Italy, or Monza, and I think that means they have some time in their hands to think of a better solution. When the COVID pandemic hit and Checo got COVID, I mean, they literally probably didn't have that much time to properly develop a solution. So changing the last name and the photo were the fastest way. But if they follow the same thought process, I'd venture a guess that it would be the results of the sprint qualifying race, which I don't know if we want to talk about a little bit of just Formula One in general and geek out on it. I'm at mixed feelings with the sprint qualifying race. I'm curious to see it, but I just think it's gonna. I think it's just gonna validate a lot of things we already know. I think we're gonna get much of the same results. I'm curious to see how the format's actually gonna change, how outcomes could happen different than a Grand Prix, and at the same time. What gets to me is the fact that they're assigning constructor points for the top 3 finishers, which I just think is just going to make Mercedes and Red Bull separate themselves further from the pack, because I don't realistically see anybody else getting those points unless someone breaks down or whatever the case happens. So since we're in sprint qualifying, I don't know if anyone wants to put their 2 cents on this, on the latest big news that's kind of shaking up Formula One there.
I think the sprint qualifying is a nice change, and let's be honest, we just get a bit more racing. From an F1 fan, I cannot complain about receiving a bit more time with the cars actually pushing around the track. But looking forward, another thing to consider outside of streaks is actually when to use your mega driver. Now that's a big thing coming up, and I know not a lot of people. I hope no one from our community has, but a lot of people within the game have used their mega drivers already. That's a big no-no. Just don't do that. Don't listen to them. They don't know what they're doing. So you should be only using your mega driver when both of the streaks for the driver appear. So for example, Max Verstappen's, top 10 quali and top 10 race finish. That is the only time that you should use your mega driver for him. And I believe the first one coming up is Monaco, is it? If he finishes the next couple of races, in the top 10, I think we can assume Monaco's when the mega drives appear. That should be your first opportunity to use that. What's interesting about this year versus the previous years, is that previous years it was just Lewis P1, Lewis Quali 1, Mega Drive Lewis when he's got it, job done. But this year, you don't know who's going to win every race. It could be Lewis, it could be Max. And if you get to Monaco and stick your Mega Drive on Lewis and he ends up P2, it's like, ugh. You've just lost a lot of points there. If you manage to get it right on, say, Max, you get a lot of points. So this year's going to be more interesting. It's going to be a lot of kill or be killed mindset. Who picks Max, who picks Lewis, who gets those points? Because whoever picked the other, you're done.
And to make matters worse, or more exciting, so to say, it's interesting that Monaco is the one circuit on the calendar that tends to favor the Red Bulls. So, it'll really put some tough decisions on who to put your mega driver on. I feel people are going to be watching until the very last second of FP3, to make their decisions, and they're still going to struggle all the way to the lockdown for qualifying. So
I could already see my face, when I Mega Drive Max and he just clips the wall, tire comes off. I can already see the pain. Honestly, if that happens, my fantasy is totally down the drain.
Well, I wouldn't. I think it would be well substantiated. I think half of the people that would do it would probably feel exactly that way. So, Andre, what do you think? I mean, you're kind of quiet over there.
Yes, sorry, I was working on the prices from last year. I'll go ahead and share the screen. This is what I'm seeing as the timeline from July 4th. There was 3 days where nothing happened after the race. And then the very, very first opportunity that we had $5.1 million worth of total movement. And that is way more than what we had in the total 3 weeks between race 1 and race 2. The next peak is another 2 days go by without anything, and then 3.1, 0.8, 0.7. And part of the reason is they really changed the way that the thresholds work, and there's now some sort of a substantial minimum that all assets seem to have. So to revisit that conversation, I'm not expecting big price movements throughout this year, unless the pecking order changes. And that's another reason why I think Ferrari is a good asset to have because they're still lowly owned, and the number of people that might be interested is large, right? They're only like at 11% ownership, so potentially 89% of the people are in the market for Ferrari, and only about 71% are in the market for McLaren. So I think Ferrari has more of an upside in terms of price increases, and that's why I'm gonna just make that bet for this one race. And if it pays off, then I'm just gonna sit on them until switching to Red Bull and then swapping out one of the other drivers, hopefully closing in that delta. When it comes to mega drivers, I'm not really that keen to try to completely change my team to try to fit Hamilton in. I think the difference between Hamilton and Verstappen is so small at this stage that it's just you're trying to like capture some sort of a noise element that comes in, like, you know, like an off race, and I'm not really the kind of person to like chase those kinds of things. I'm more in line of all right, let's try to figure out what is the average trend, how are teams doing on average, and Verstappen seems like the better bang for the buck, and so I'll stick with him, and I'll try Mega Driver probably with him in Monaco, because as what you said, Monaco seems to favor Red Bull, and you know they have a shorter wheelbase, which is probably a little bit nicer to have around those tight corners.
Yeah, I mean, that's some really good stuff there. I think that's one of the biggest top tips that we could have shared so far in terms of price movement. Seeing that chart was just awesome. And yeah, I think that before Monaco, should we get the opportunity to do another one of these, I can certainly try to put together some performance analysis of the constructors per circuit and see who can usually edge out and do better. So that would be a really, really interesting one to actually take a look at. That could be a homework assignment. And for those asking about my hat and calling this a Nikita Mazepin hat, I see Kieran's already laughing at this. I don't think it's even worthy of a response in that one. But, you know, like I'm sure there could be a clever Mazepin joke somewhere to throw in there. But no, I will stick, you know, firmly by saying this is my little recognition for Niki Lauda and the greatness of the man there, of the Austrian that you know helped shape Mercedes, acquired, you know, one of the very few drivers that got titles with two different constructors, which not a lot of people can say that, but yeah, so I'll just say that one in there and kind of slide it in. But
shout out to John Alesi for smashing Nicky's car into the wall.
Yeah, I saw that one. That was that was pretty cringeworthy. So
painful.
Yeah. Anywho, so Andre, any other big topics? Anything else that, since we're looking at the numbers from your side and everything, anything that you want to bring forward or kind of switch the gears to?
Yeah, sure. Let's give this a go. So I'm sharing right now some adjusted predictions for like race 3. Sorry, says race 2. But this kind of was what I was referring to, where Ferrari might have like 167.3 expected points, McLaren 168, and then Red Bull 180. It says that 13 or 12 point delta for the upgrade. And for this particular race, where McLaren has a 15 point streak, you know, they cover that delta comfortably if they, you know, qualify well and race well. And like, it's in a way you're kind of banking on that anyway if you're going to go for McLaren. So it's not like you're making an additional bet. Ferrari, not so much. They're a little bit lower in terms of predicted, 167 instead of 168, and then they have a lower streak. But what I am interested in is kind of like target teams that you might want to have in a couple of races from now. And so for me, looking at a Red Bull team that consists of Bottas, Verstappen, Perez, Turbo, Mick, Schumacher, Russell, and then Red Bull, that team is like in the vicinity of 105. And as Bottas drops a little bit further down, it could be like coming sooner than we might think. That is the kind of team that might score some more points. But again, Norris being underpriced, Gasly having some nice performances as well. It's really hard for me to kind of anticipate what kind of team I would want to have at 105 or 106 level. Right now, I'm not sure how much we can, plan for that, and probably race 3 and race 4 will come by and we'll kind of learn more information. But at this point, I think making the bet on either Ferrari or McLaren makes sense. You hope for the best, and then if they do have a good race, then you stick to them, increase the budget, and then swap to Red Bull for race 4. I'm definitely going to be Red Bull race 4, and I might even switch back to Red Bull for race 3, depending on how things go.
I feel like this conversation will not age well at all if by the second half of the season Mercedes gets their shit together and just blows Red Bull out of the water, and we're just going to be here remember that video that we did several months ago and just had it all wrong. But I'm all for, but I'm equally in that boat of Red Bull optimism, and thinking that Red Bull has actually something to show for Mercedes this time around. So I'm all for it on that side. Kieran, anything on your side?
I covered streaks and the value of them. Don't get too much tunnel vision on a constructor receiving streaks, and don't just think, oh, they scored the same as Ferrari, they scored the same as Red Bull. You have to understand why they scored the same and what is the likelihood that they will score the same. That's the most important part, the likelihood. In my opinion, the likelihood of McLaren and Ferrari scoring the same as Red Bull, like they did at Imola, low. Therefore, what do I expect? Red Bull to go higher. So then will the 15-point gap from McLaren be worth it? Possibly, might equalize. But then again, it does open up a lot of budget to swap a low driver for someone who can score a lot of points. So there is an opportunity to score a lot more. I covered mega drivers. Oh, and just for transparency, I'm probably going to go back to the Red Bull. I don't like messing around with my constructor too much. The problem at the moment is that Perez scored a P11. So the constructor streak is a bit messy if I hold, say, Red Bull long-term versus Ferrari long-term or McLaren long-term, because already Red Bull has missed a streak. It's already missed a race streak, which I believe is a 10-point streak because Perez, didn't he get P11 in Bahrain as well? So Red Bull...
No, he got P5, but he got P11 in qualifying at Bahrain. So Red Bull's screwed all around for their streaks. They're completely off sync.
So that's something really important. Red Bull might hit their first streak by the time McLaren score their second streak or Ferrari's second streak. We took for granted last 2 seasons where Mercedes would just keep slamming out the streaks reliably. So that's something really to consider now, is the rate of streaks that these constructors will be pulling up, and how likely is it their 2 drivers will mess it up for everyone. So obviously streaks are the most important part in the game, I think, to really boost your points. And a lot of that's luck. And I mean, good luck, because I don't know. It's a messy situation.
So assuming Red Bull gets their shit together and, or Perez in specifically, right? And the first 2 races were flukes between qualifying in Bahrain and Imola, the race in Imola. So what would happen at that point would be that they would be on their race streak for race 5. So Monaco seems to be a really interesting cliffhanger for fantasy, because you're going to have Red Bull on a race constructor streak, and you're going to have your window for a mega driver. So if you're going to put it all in on Verstappen, you technically could walk out with a ton of points if that materializes itself. Absolutely. And so it'll be really interesting to see how all that kind of comes together.
My fear for Monaco is that Lewis Hamilton, Monaco, perfectly fine. I think he's just going to sail through, do really well. Max at Monaco, look, I don't know. The walls are tight. Perez at Monaco, come on. He's already struggling at a couple of tracks.
He's hit a podium in Monaco. And in Force India, he's got podiums at Monaco. One of the very few podiums he got with Force India was at Monaco.
But he did a lot of racing in that car already. But this Red Bull is notoriously difficult to drive. Yeah, Bahrain, he did a great race. Imola, he did a great qualifying. But in the wet, he struggled. So when it's unfamiliar, it's a barrier for entry for him. And I think Monaco is a big barrier. I mean, we'll see. Maybe this is just me being a bit fearful. It's Monaco. It's the walls are tight. You make one mistake, that's it. And that car wants you to make a mistake.
So is it fair to say if there's a 5% chance of rain in Monaco, you're already ditching Perez?
Oh yeah, definitely. He's gone. Absolutely gone. Like, there's just not a chance.
Just watch him get podiums on race 3 and 4, and then the conversation will be completely different.
Yeah, I want to see Kieran come back. I want to see Kieran come back if he gets podiums in races 3 and 4. I mean, the guy started on the front row last, in the last race. So let's give him some credit. I mean, he's been doing quite a bit.
He's doing well. It's just when there's a different variable that appears, it's fine. He has to learn through that variable. If we gave him if we gave him Silverstone right now, I'd expect a podium from him. That's easy because it's a simple track. It's hopefully dry. He can do it. But you give him Imola and then a bit of rain on top, or you give him Monaco, a bit of rain over here, or you give him a track he's never driven before. If you give him like just this sprinkle little something spicy on top, I think he will struggle and have to learn through it with a difficult car. Whereas someone like Lewis, he's done everything with that Mercedes. So if you sprinkle, I don't know, dust on the track, he'd be like, fine, I can do it. So that's...
I don't know. I know we are a very data-driven conversation here, but I feel that drivers like Perez, and I'll even slide in Ricciardo still. I've said it in the past, I'm still on the Ricciardo train. I think that once he's up to speed and everything, he'll be able to deliver great things. I think he's going to be that good driver on the second half of the year that will probably lose its value enough where he's a decent buy. I think he's about to tick down again another 0.1 if he hasn't already recently done so. So I still want to keep my eyes on Ricciardo because I think that once, like we saw the same thing when he switched to Renault. His first half year in Renault was just disastrous, and then he really started picking up. So clearly there's for as simple as it seems to just switch cars and you're in Formula One, same type of performance, same type of everything, but a lot of people tend to get caught out with having to switch from one constructor to the other. So I'm still hopeful and full, like he's absolutely ignoring the data and the numbers and everything. I'm still hopeful and I'm going to make that claim. But I'll tell you what, guys, just as a quick conclusion for where I am right now, at least from how I see it, one of my teams, I think the one that didn't get buried in the last race because I had Perez turbo driver, I had Bottas, I had everything. Like you want a recipe for disaster? Just look at my team at Imola. But the one team that I have that did all right, I try to make my moves to maximize the money and increase the budget, which put me at a 4 out of 6, and the only move I have left is to move to McLaren to get that to tick over and try to take the streaks. So what I'm hearing is I'm going to stick with getting McLaren in, getting that +1 that's about to happen, ride that into this upcoming race, hopefully catch the constructors, but try to start organizing myself to have Red Bull and Verstappen by race 5. And because to me, from everything I'm hearing, we talked about, like immediate strategies and then the medium-term strategies all the way to your mega driver, I would say that is one of the big things. At least for me, one of those teams seems to be dead set into that strategy right now. So has anyone here changed how they felt so far based on the conversation we've had? I mean, I know that our very first meeting, Leclerc was the game changer in our conversations.
I think I just want to quickly take it back to Ricciardo. I think that as his price continues to dip, I start to consider him more just because in the Renault, okay, fine, it was a new car. He had to get to grips with it. But he was the benchmarker for Renault. You did not know the limit of that car until you had a good driver in it to push that limit. Right now, we know that Lando is pushing the limit of that car and he's achieving with it. So you know where it can be. I rate Ricciardo in a similar skill bracket as Lando, maybe slightly above. It just takes time for him to adjust. Now, if you follow that belief, by the second half of the season, when Ricciardo gets to more grips with the car, he should be where Lando is or slightly above. that would make him a sensational pick at that point. So it's important to let's just keep our eyes on him. He's not doing great at the moment, but as the season progresses, he'll get more connected with the car, and I do expect him to be right there with him. And it's a reliable pick because you could see the benchmark of what the car should do compared to Renault, where Ocon wasn't showing us what the car can do. So we're just waiting on that. Back last season, we were just waiting for Ricciardo to tell us how good the car was. This season, we know how good the car is. So as his price drops, I think it's just something worth considering. And mention it, as I've just mentioned Ocon, but his price also makes things quite interesting. His price just keeps going down, and therefore his points per million keeps going up.
I think Ricciardo is a very, very interesting case, specifically because his price has slid down so much, while somebody like Leclerc kept going up. They're now in a different price brackets, and so whenever I think about price changes, now we have to really not just think about the money-making team or whatever, but we have to think about how much of a market does a particular asset have. And I think because Ricciardo has already gone down in price, and people that have him, which is like 31% of the fantasy players, and they would want to change them, they're probably some of those lagging behind type players, the ones that are coming in discovering that by race 3 they've lost $1 million on Ricciardo, or they've lost whatever else. And so who can they afford? And I'm not sure that at this point Ricciardo owners can switch to Leclerc. Ricciardo owners will be switching to Gasly, Norris, if they don't already have him, to people that are already lower than him. So I have a feeling that Ricciardo will have some sort of a floor that's defined by people not paying attention to their fantasy teams. And so I don't actually expect him to keep sliding. At some point, there just won't be any point to replace him with anybody else. And so and Norris is already so highly owned. I'm not convinced that Norris's price will overtake Ricciardo's at this stage. It's programmed in. It is the same situation that happens in other fantasy leagues as well, like FPL. Vardy is still 10 million, and Iheanacho is like 6.3 or something, and it should be the inverse of that, but it won't get to it, right? And it's part of the game. So I'm not sure that Ricciardo will have to drop lower than Norris in order for him to make sense to me, and I don't think that will happen.
But Andre, actually jumping in on one of the questions here, because I think it's an interesting segue, because you talked about not being able to afford Leclerc anymore if you're a Ricciardo owner. So we talked, I think we dedicated an entire episode into burning the wild card early on. But what about people who haven't burned their wild cards? People that are waiting, perhaps to use their wild card for what it's intended for. And let's say you're in a situation where, you've held Ricciardo for a long time and you realize that it's at a loss. You can't make a simple switch to a Leclerc. So what if you want to take a full, free pass into being able to build a team that you want? What are some wild card strategies that both you and Kieran, would like to talk about? Anything that you could probably give them to say, hey, when should you consider using your wild card? Should it be as soon as you realize you've made a mistake? Because for everyone watching, and some of you may not know, at the half point of the season, you do get a second wild card. So technically, I believe if you don't use it, you lose it by the second.
That's right.
By the halfway through. So same thing with the Mega Driver for anyone that doesn't know that. But any thoughts on when should you use your wild card if you haven't used it already?
Around the Mega Driver points, so race 5, race 10, and then if you do race 10, there is a potential for swapping into a team, seeing how it goes. Like it could be a bit of an interesting hedge or whatever. And then race 12 comes around, and then you'll probably be able to make some swaps to kind of return your team to normal. And if not, then, race 13, I think, is when you get the second wild card, and that will be, a fine strategy as well. I've already played mine just because I wanted to bank on the price increases, because, the plot that I showed, like it's most price changes occur in the beginning when people realize that the pecking order is different. Yeah, so whenever there is a signal that something is either different, say McLaren, brings an upgrade that's worth half a second, they'll probably create an upset. So I guess keep listening to the news and what's out there, and yeah, keep a steady eye on that. Kieran, do you have any thoughts?
No, I'm pretty much in the same boat. I actually saved mine because you just never know. You just never know when something can change halfway through the race and it will creep up on you. You don't have the ability to switch into an overall more stronger team. It's only been a couple races, so I don't think there's any scenario where I need to use it now. But I believe that maybe race 6, race 7 might be a good time for me to start reconsidering things. But also, yeah, around the Mega Drive time. I mean, that could be a perfect time to, enter in a new team, a whole new team lineup, as well as get your Mega Drive in if you believe a different guy is better for it. So around the Mega Drives, and just keep your ear low to the ground and just try and listen for when things do change, because then you'll want that ability to swap into something amazing.
Yeah. If Mercedes takes over, by race, whatever, 5, 6, 7, then playing Hamilton Mega Driver on race 10 could be the trick. Kieran, you were one of the people that waited on the second Mega Driver right until the second Bahrain race in the doubleheader, something like that, right? And that paid off.
I'm definitely not humble about this one. Yep, everyone ran it. I think I can't remember what the first one was, but everyone ran it, and he lost a position somewhere, and it just did not maximize as well as it should have. But I was the only one who held away. I didn't want to do the same as everyone else, because at the end of the day, while we are a community helping each other, we're also against each other. And I can't do better than everyone else if I'm doing exactly the same as everyone else. So I let everyone else hit the Mega Drive on Hamilton. He bottled it.
So the moral of the story here is don't do anything you're recommending, so that way we have a chance of doing what you're doing.
Maybe. Who knows? Maybe I'm against all of you. Maybe this is all just one big conspiracy to try and get you guys to do the wrong thing. And I think it was Turkey or one of those races. It was one of the last. I had to wait a full 10 races or whatever amount of races for him to get his next streak. And everyone's always saying, oh, I hope he DNFs. I hope this and that, because it would ruin me completely. No, he got it. I Mega Drived, perfect race, and I scored a big delta over everyone who did use the Mega Drive earlier. And that shot me right up the rankings.
14 points times 3, basically, I think is what you got.
Yeah.
Significant.
So it's nice to hold on to things. Don't just rush in. Monaco, like that, you can kind of tell I'm not 100% sold on Monaco, whereas a lot of people go, oh, streak time, boom, let's go. But I'm thinking that look, I just don't feel as secure about this one as, say, a normal track, and I would rather wait.
And it's important to mention that this year, so last year we had 17 races. So it was at race 8 or race 9 that we got, the Mega Driver and the Wildcard reinstated, which means for the first half of the season, you didn't have 2 races to potentially use your Mega Driver on because of Hamilton streaks, because it was race 5 or it was race 5. So you really didn't have much of a chance, because by race 10, you'd be on the second round, right in the second half of the season. And then you had race 10 and race 15, again, assuming that you have that Hamilton that just consistently delivers, top 10 finishes on qualifying and race days with 0 DNFs. So that's just one of the big things to kind of consider. This year, you have 23 races, so you will for sure have 2 races before and 2 races after. So being able to decide which race you want to try to hedge your bets on for that Mega Driver is crucial, because it could be, I can't remember which ones are off the top of my head between rounds 5, rounds 10, 15, and 20, but there's certainly a lot to consider there for people that believe, especially on the considering the DNF risk and all of those items, because now we're going for 23 races on the same allocation of engines. There's a lot to consider, that you gotta bet against, but it can certainly pay dividends if you do it well. So absolutely.
There's also another thing to consider on the topic of allocations. We've also got those sprint races, which will chew up even more of allocated parts. So That I think that's an even bigger consideration for this year. I remember what I was always hoping for was like picking a driver and then finding out, he qualified. Well, they would have like a new engine. They'd have to start last, which is great because I know they're way better than last place. So that's an easy like 10 point overtake. So that was something I was always looking for last season. And if there's a higher rate of that happening this season, that's just going to add more flavor to the game.
Those 3 sprint races, they're 100K each, right? So add them together, that's 300, which is a normal race. So basically we have 24 races now instead of 23. Yeah, definitely. Every engine is going to have to last a little bit longer. But they figure it out every year. So I think we'll have to think about that at a later stage.
Yeah, I don't know how much it'll affect from a fantasy perspective, but just as a Formula One fan, it's kind of interesting that it's like talks of budget cap, but now you have to do an extra race, and they're actually so logistically, I think there's 3 races that you have to do because there's a lot they have to move for and set up and costs, and if there's accidents on the races, the increase for expenses of having to build a new chassis, whatever it is. So it's just very interesting that we just, we keep complicating the sport a lot more in terms of cost, but we're like, you can't spend more than this. So
I think they increased the cap by $500,000 for the teams. Yeah.
Okay. So interesting.
You brought up something about hedging bets, and I just want to circle back onto the conversation about Red Bull versus Ferrari. And the reason that I want to go Ferrari and 2 Red Bulls is, in a way, I feel like that is hedging my bets. Like, I don't want to go triple Red Bull because Perez has already disappointed twice, right? So if I, extend the trend line, then I should be wary of Perez disappointing for a 3rd time. But I still want to run him in case that he does well. And so I think having that combination of Verstappen and Perez, but not sticking to Red Bull, is right for the it's about par of where I want to be. If I have Ferrari, then if Perez does poorly, then both of the Ferraris go up. And if Perez does well enough, then hopefully I get the streak.
Could you
do you know what that sounds like a smart man's decision in balancing risk and points? But if you're not smart man, do what I'm doing: Perez, Red Bull, and Max Verstappen. And if it goes well, we're the best. But if it goes down, we're the worst. So kill or be killed.
Yeah, we've been saying triple Red Bull since before the season started, right?
Yeah, and everyone's been kind of going with it. So, but can you run? Now that I'm thinking about it, if it's about hedging bets, is there a budget level that you can run Mercedes, Verstappen, and Perez and figure the rest out? Because I feel like that is doable at some point. You have what I'm just trying to add numbers in my head. It's 25, 20, and 30 with a massive rounding there. So it's 50, you're at 80. I mean, you get what right now, 15.
We'll have something like 20 left. 19, 20 left for 3 drivers. It's doable, but you'll have to run Mick, Schumacher, Russell, and Tsunoda or something like that. Which
Schumacher is a great survivability driver. He's definitely out like in terms of 10 points per race for 5 million is a fantastic it's a fantastic number. I can try to share my screen now and kind of, since we're all going on that, and I'll take a risk at sharing my dashboard here, but if we let me just take out, we were looking at Vettel before we started, but if we take out Vettel, if we just put all right, well, do you want to update? There we go, apply. So, if we're looking at, this has races from throughout the entire 2020 and 2021. If we just look at the current year, so you see Schumacher is there at a 2.1 in points per million. He's one of the highest players that you could kind of run. So in theory, you could try to have Schumacher. And were you saying you had 19 and 20 out of 100 million budget, or are you already kind of looking at 105 or something like that?
I was looking at like 102.
Okay.
So 82 and a half is what I have Mercedes, Verstappen, Perez.
Yeah. your next bets at that range, see, like Latifi, Mazepin, and Russell, they're all the way at the bottom here, so they're not doing you any good. But if Giovinazzi gets low enough, you might be able to get there. Then beyond that, it'll be interesting.
This is statistics with 2 data points, right? We don't really know how this is going to progress. Russell had an amazing race, and actually, I caved and I ran Russell instead of Mick following our conversation. But I regret it. I changed in the last 5 minutes.
You're a smart man. That was the play. Like, don't listen to any of the haters. He was going to get like 12, 15 points. And I'd like to point out that Mick did crack his wing off, so it was very close to a DNF on Mick as well.
Well, it was really close for Hamilton as well, but
on the topic
where he ended up.
On the topic of Mick versus Russell, I want to hear no debates from anyone. It's Russell all the way. Russell all the way.
So I'm switching to Schumacher on the first, elegant opportunity to rearrange my, subspank without 10 points off.
It's interesting though, because Russell tends to score. Yeah, I mean, look at this. Looking at last year, so we're looking right now at all the races last year and the 2 races this year. He tends to be somewhere in the average of 4 points, simply because look at here, these are DNF points. So anytime you see this, this drop, it was a DNF. You see the minus 15s here. But he's had races too where he scores 0, -2, -2 with no DNF. So he got a -10 with no DNF, which I would venture a guess by where this sits. This doesn't look like Turkey, but that's so. I'm still not confident that considering both years and his current price, he's at 1.0 in points per million. So I'm still not convinced on Russell. As much as I like the guy and I think he's a great driver, and I can't wait to see what Drive to Survive comes up between the drama between Bottas and Russell. I don't know. I just don't see it that Russell's that good of a driver. I think I bet that you guys are still lingering on to 2 years ago and how great he was as a survivability driver. But the reality of it is, that's Mick now. Mick is the survivability driver to pick all day.
Mick is the survivability driver, but I'm not holding on to him being that anymore. I'm actually holding on to being a lower mid-tier driver who can race, who can score, who can overtake. That's who I see Russell as. And I saw good stuff from Imola, and I've seen good stuff from Bahrain. And
there's no question about that. Like he's super good, and in a way, like he has to punch above his weight, and he's pressured to go towards that, peaky performance of trying to just get everything right and overtake everyone. But that's just a lot more risk than Mick just la-di-da, just driving it along, cruising, beating Mazepin, not that hard. And then just waiting for everybody to, DNF due to whatever, normal mechanics and engines.
Yeah, and Haas, or whatever they're going to be called very soon anyhow, if the rumors are true, it just genuinely looks like they have 0 pace. So long as those engines hold together and they just finish races, these guys are not even going to be in the running for battles for 17th or 16th. So I genuinely think that it's, you couldn't have better survivability drivers so long as the car keeps driving around the track at, a ridiculously low pace. I think Schumacher's biggest threat is avoiding Mazepin. So if he can avoid Mazepin, if he puts bumper cars, around his Formula One and just avoids Mazepin running straight into him, I think he's in good shape.
Yeah, and I think one final point why I think Schumacher is good is that he is lower owned than Russell. And so if Russell has a terrible race 3, then you could expect some of that 43% that Russell has to, go towards Schumacher, which is 25%. And that's a big market of potential movement. And I think that will make Schumacher's price go up. You can hold on to him. Racing people can realize that he is that survivability driver. And then, maybe 0.3, 0.4 million could be used somewhere else to upgrade. You can basically hopefully run Michael Schumacher until he catches up in price with Russell due to people, dropping Russell if Russell has a terrible race. So a lot of ifs, but
I'd be curious. Again, it's a whole conversation of just basically how the prices are coming down, and if there's not going to be that much more price movement after the first couple of weeks, it'll be interesting how that all comes together. But I completely lost track of time. I know we're right on time, so I appreciate everyone that listened in. I'll give you guys the final word if you guys want to close it out and kind of just put the final tips in how to, anything that you want to say in terms of building teams to go the distance, as we called it. So Andre, kick it off with you.
Well, unfortunately, the way that prices work, there is some no-brainer decisions. Norris, you have to have him. If you want to have the ultimate constructor in terms of points per million and price, like integrate that area under the curve, you get Red Bull. And then you get some, handful of drivers that are in that band of Perez, Leclerc, potentially Ricciardo when he gets, his act together. And if you want to run all of them, then you kind of have to sacrifice places in other places. And so what I'm thinking is that the next upgrade that I see is having Bottas, even though that he is not very convincing at the moment, and Imola was a terrible race. But I don't think that is going to be indicative of Mercedes' performance. I think Mercedes will improve. I think Bottas will improve with Mercedes as well. And so at that point, he is so much cheaper this season, like 5 million than last. It could be a good move at some point. And so I'm keeping in mind that 105 million team that has Bottas in it. I'll have to rely on having two survivability drivers or Mick and Russell. So I'm not really looking forward to that, but I'll definitely, I guess, keep jotting down what are some of the potential teams. I want to have Ocon at some point, I think, because I think he's been sliding down a little bit beyond the merit of how far he should have slid down given the performance. But whatever, I'll take the good deal. I think Tsunoda out, Ocon in could be a potential move if Tsunoda doesn't have a good race in race 3. So right now I'm definitely focusing on trying to have a good team while still making hedges that, like, if something happens, I am 1 or 2 subs away from jumping onto the assets that will give me more money to the point that, by race 6 or 7, I can be at that, next tier of a team where I can really have the differential, not of just racing a different driver, but racing a different tier of a driver, whereas everybody else is a tier below in one of the 5. So that's kind of like my long-term strategy. You're muted.
Kieran, any final words on your side?
Final words. I won't be recommending as much, but I would just say, ask yourself why certain constructors or certain drivers scored what they scored. Try and figure out the context for why, and then predict how reliable that is. Like, ask yourself, is that likely to happen again? If it is not likely to happen again, you need to go back and start considering opportunities and considering scenarios that are more likely, provided everything goes normal. Now, you can't predict the unpredictable, but you can always go back to reliability. So yes, we've only had 2 data points so far. There's not a lot to go off of. So it's a bit difficult, but just think about context, think about realistic expectations of what drivers and constructors should perform with, and you should be able to make good decisions that way. If you pick McLaren, I can't tell you if you're right or wrong, nor Ferrari, nor Red Bull. It's all 3. Each one of them could be right in their own way. It's just how likely the scenario that is. And like I mentioned at Imola, with Perez and Bottas not finishing. It allowed a lot of points to trickle down to those midfield teams. So you just got to ask yourself, is that going to happen again at Portugal? Is that likely to happen? Will it rain?
Right.
Is it a tough track? Questions like that.
Yeah, I think those are good points. I'll just say this. I recommend everyone looks at the numbers, right? And to do a kind of final pitch, look into the Formula One Fantasy Tracker website, look at the Discord to see Andre's things, because what you showed on the constructor points was clear. You know, a lot of times we have the gut feel that someone might be better because we have that impression, like, you know, Norris made a podium, but McLaren. But if you look at it, there are other teams, you know, in similar situations that are making just as many points because you're not considering the whole picture. So look at the numbers, make their own calls. And I appreciate everyone that kind of joined in. There are a couple of questions that we couldn't get to just on merit of time, but make sure to ask your questions. Make sure to check out the Discord and the website. And if you guys need anything else, we'll keep coming back for more, let us know ideas for future ones. Because again, we're driving all of these out of your recommendations, your questions, and your suggestions. So listen, I appreciate you, Andre. I appreciate you, Kieran, for coming and joining me one more time on one of these. And to everyone that's watched, again, keep the feedback coming so we can keep more of these going. I hope you enjoyed the images, the fact that we're sharing screens, and we'll see you all on the next one. And